Hey everyone, friend of the podcast, Carl Bonner is a mixing engineer who helps other producers and mixers find, attract, and build better relationships with clients who are making the kind of music you are most passionate about. He recently began developing a course based on how he trains the Spotify algorithm to make super accurate recommendations for you to find potential artists to work with. And he's giving it all away for free while it's still a work in progress. So go to carlbonner.com/coaching to learn more, and I'll have a link for that in the show notes. So go check it out. Hey everyone, happy 2022 and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I hope you guys enjoyed your holiday season and are ready to kick it back in full swing with the podcast. This week's episode is with Fernando Lodeiro. I had a great chat with Fernando. What a cool guy. We talked about so many things, including moving to the USA from Venezuela, studying at Berklee College of Music, working at the legendary Avatar Studios. We talked about going freelance, work ethic, work-life balance, his secret weapon, which is keeping in touch with people, which you'll hear tons of amazing stories about, working front of house with Kenny Garrett, working with Esperanza Spalding, working with Paul McCartney, being present with his family during the lockdowns, investing in instruments, and just being a people person. So I think you're going to love this conversation. So with all that to say, enjoy this conversation, episode 126 with Fernando Lodeiro. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Fernando Lodeiro. Fernando is a two-time Grammy Award-winning engineer, mixer, producer, currently based in New York City. In October of 2007, Fernando moved to New York City and was offered a position as a runner at Avatar Studios, back at its original name, The Power Station. His talent, work ethic, and love for music and his craft were quickly noticed, and within 6 months, he was hired as an assistant engineer. In his role, he had the opportunity to work with many of the best engineers, producers, and artists in the industry. After 5 years, Fernando left Avatar and decided to go out on his own. Throughout his career, he's had the honor and pleasure of working with many great artists, including Paul McCartney, Esperanza Spalding, Nile Rodgers and Chic, Ms. Lauryn Hill, Vampire Weekend, Bryan Adams, Kenny Garrett, Prince, James Taylor, Lady Gaga, Tony Bennett, Regina Spektor, Roberta Flack, Bjork, it just goes on. Ben Folds, Susanna Vega, among others, as well as Super Bowl halftime shows, Broadway musicals, and film scores. Fernando has also worked as the front-of-house engineer, touring all over the world with several acclaimed artists. Currently, Fernando spends most of his time recording, mixing, and producing bands and artists in his recording studio in Brooklyn, my hometown, as well as many other major studios in New York, LA, and wherever the music takes him. Fern and I connected on Instagram recently, and I just found out through Travis Ferentz of Progressions, and I invited him on the show, and he's graciously agreed to do that. So with all that to say, welcome to Secret Sonics, Fern.
Hey, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. So yeah, we were kind of schmoozing before this began even, but I'm just curious about your story, and I kind of left it out of the bio. But from Venezuela to Berkeley to New York, can you give a little bit of the lowdown of, I guess, how music became a thing for you and how that kind of evolved into the production thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I always loved music from a young age. Like, I didn't have I don't come from a musical family, even though they all love music, but they're not like, my grandfather used to play sax when he was growing up in Spain, but I never saw him play saxophone because once he migrated to Venezuela, he just had like a different job, But I definitely come from a family of music lovers, especially my dad and my uncle. I got a lot from them. And yeah, so even from, as far as I can remember, like I just knew that I wanted to play music. And at some point I just kept asking, it's like, yeah, I want a guitar. And my dad was like, no, if you want to play guitar, first learn how to play the cuatro, which is like a Venezuelan instrument. It's 4 strings and it has absolutely nothing to do with the rock sound of a guitar. So I was like, no, I don't want to do this. But at some point I became stubborn enough that I actually got a guitar and, started teaching myself, learning chords and, like playing to some of my favorite songs. And after a while, my parents saw that I was like serious enough that, they actually believed in me to make this a career. So I was very lucky to have their support from like very early. And my dad and my uncle, they used to listen to a lot of progressive rock. So I actually grew up listening to that.
Like Rush, that kind of thing.
Rush, Genesis, yes, all those guys. And at some point I found out about Dream Theater. And I went deep into that thing. And because of them, I found out about Berklee College of Music. And it was just like, that's it. That's paradise. That's like Mecca. That's everything that you ever dream of. But of course, it was like out of my reach, like with the conversion of money into dollars. Like there's no way I could afford that or anything in the United States. So we found a college in Mexico City that was associated kind of like through Berkeley, like it belonged to like what they call the Berkeley International Network. So Berkeley kind of like talked to the teachers and they did certain training there and all that stuff. And every year they would go down to Mexico City to do like auditions for scholarships, and they would use this school as kind of like the place where they would host these auditions.
Yeah, so it was like a launching pad to kind of potentially get into Berkeley.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't just like people from the school. It was like anyone from like South America that if they wanted to audition, this was a place where they would like go do it, So after they were coming after my first semester, I definitely didn't think that I had like any sort of level to get a scholarship in Berkeley because, like I said, I'd never studied music before. That was like the first time that I was actually studying. But I thought like, let me just see if they even accept me for the audition. Most likely nothing will come out of it, but at least I will know what the format is like. So then for next year, when they come down and I actually know a little bit more of what I'm doing, I also know what to expect. I got accepted for the audition. I actually got a scholarship, but it wasn't enough money. So I just kept studying in Mexico. I auditioned a year later and I got more scholarship. And after a while, I had enough money to go to Boston. So I ended up going to Berkeley. And
is that how you know Travis?
That's how we met. Yeah, we met. He was a couple semesters ahead of me, but we both worked at the studio office, like doing booking or tech support for like the studios and all that. So yeah, that's how we know each other.
Amazing. Yeah. Makes sense.
So I did.
So continue as you were. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So my original plan was to actually be a musician. I started as a guitar player, like I said, and that's what I wanted to do. And my dad always says like, oh, why don't you consider like sound engineering? Because he's like a mechanical engineer, and that just seems something like a little bit more like I can actually get a job in this, And when he mentioned that to me, the only thing that came to mind is like, oh yeah, he's talking about like, doing sound for like shows, like front of house. For some reason, it didn't even never cross my mind that people actually recorded albums and that was an engineer, But when I got to Berkeley, I saw those studios and I got exposed to that side of things and I just fell completely in love. And I'm not going to lie, like a big part of me transitioning into or pushing the engineering and production side is because I'm a foreigner in the United States. And if I wanted to stay in the United States after I finished school, I had like a year to like find a job and like, or someone to sponsor like an artist visa. So I figured, okay, it's going to be easier to do this side of things than just do it as a musician, like with so many other people trying to play shows in small bars and cafes in the city,
Right.
So when I was in Boston, I was coming down to New York pretty often for like shows and all that. So I decided to move down here after school. And I knew where I wanted to work because a lot of people from Berkeley, when they moved to New York, they ended up working at Legacy or Right Track or whatever it was called at that time. So I knew a lot of people in those studios. I knew that I could get a job. But I also knew that most of that scene was hip-hop or R&B based. And I just I like working with live musicians, so like having like a full band in front of me and being part of that experience. And that was Avatar. Like I remember on the day when I went to do my interview, they were mixing a Muse album in Studio G. My Morning Jacket was in Studio A. Taking Back Sunday was in Studio C. I think so. It was just like, okay, cool. This is obviously the place for me,
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I started cleaning bathrooms and making coffee for free for 3 months. And then I got hired as a general assistant. And I actually moved up pretty quick into an assistant and started working on sessions. And stayed there for 5.5 years and then went freelance.
What was the impetus to go freelance after working at like the most legendary studio in New York?
Well, I think to be honest, it's like when you have this fantasy of like working at a studio, you always see how things were like back in the day. Like, you start as an assistant and then someone likes you and they take you on as an engineer, or that management starts pushing you. So, okay, he's been here for this amount of time. Like, let's start introducing him to our clients as an engineer, and they kind of like help build up your career. And unfortunately, that wasn't happening too much at the time. So I got a little bit jaded, because I was doing all this. I was doing the biggest sessions, and it was always amazing to work with these incredible producers and engineers and artists that, even now, like you're always learning from these people, you're always learning from anyone. So it wasn't anything about me thinking it's like, oh, I learned what I needed to learn from this place. It was more like I was starting to do a lot more of the work that the engineers were doing without getting the credit or the money. And at that point, like I was like the head assistant engineer of the studio, and I was making what the receptionist made on her training day. At some point, I just kind of got old, and I thought I had all these projects coming from the outside. Let's just push in this direction. Like, I don't want to be an assistant forever. So I went that way.
That's good that you had like enough, people wanting to work with you outside of the studio that you were able to kind of take that plunge.
Yeah, it was definitely like a gamble. It's not like I had that many things. I just had like 1 or 2 projects lined up, but I was making better money from those projects. So that gave me like being used to like living on pretty much nothing for so long, having a little bit of that. I knew that I could stretch it out to find the next project, right?
Right. By this point, did you have a green card? Was it easy to kind of start your own?
I had an artist visa. So my first artist visa was sponsored by the studio. And my second artist visa was sponsored by a friend of mine who has like a production company, and I was doing some work for him. So that gave me the freedom of like leaving the studio without being worried about losing my visa or anything like that,
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I'm sure that was a whole other, set of things to think about.
Oh, absolutely. It was definitely nerve-wracking. But yeah, luckily everything worked out, and I'm still here.
Yeah, amazing. So I actually saw on Instagram a photo of Avatar Studios like recently that you posted. Are you still going back there to do some work? Wasn't it purchased by Berkeley?
Yeah, so
am
Berkeley,
I right?
Berkeley's running it. Someone else bought it and kind of like gave it to Berkeley to run it, which is amazing. And I think it was incredible that the old owner of the studio was able to like hold off because he wanted for it to continue being a studio. He could have sold that building like years and years ago, just become another condo building or a parking lot or something like that.
Right.
But he actually held out, trying to find the right person for it. And yeah, luckily, Pete Muller is the guy who bought it with Berkeley. They took over and it's still open for everyone, So yeah, I've been going back there quite a bit. But it was like that, like they did it together, and like they talked to the city because like the studio is the biggest live room in New York City, and obviously New York City has all of the Broadway scene and all that, so it's like a place that is needed around here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I remember the first videos I saw of that studio were like, maybe there's that video of John Mayer doing that song for Continuum.
Yeah, for Continuum. That's right. I watched that video also before I came down, before I moved down here, and I was like, oh wow, that studio looks awesome.
I know.
And funny enough, so that's one of the
good.
That's kind of like how I found out about that studio. And then as I started looking people that worked there as well, I saw that Dream Theater had done a few albums there. So to me, it was just like, well, okay, I guess I'm just following these guys around,
Dude, you are able to kind of manifest the things you set your sights on. Like you were able to be like, okay, Berkeley, I'm going there.
Absolutely, man.
Okay, cool. Avatar Studios, I'm going there. What's the
law of attraction, man.
Total. First of all, totally. What's your secret for manifesting the things, your dreams? I don't know. Like what, or is there something that like, is just perseverance, blood, sweat, and tears?
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of hard work.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. Got to put in the hours and the reps.
Yeah, and I think like, I've actually learned a lot from Travis through his whole podcast, because at some point you kind of like, at least for me, like kind of like got into like automatic mode, like you get clients coming to you, you get to like just work and you just go through like the phases. And I kind of like stop thinking about like, okay, what are my next goals? And Travis, like that's one of the things that he talks about in his show. So it's just like, oh wow, maybe I should start thinking about this, because whenever I set myself a goal, like I was able to get there,
Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, he interviewed me for his podcast. I don't know when that episode's coming out, but it was interesting to talk about goals with him because he's got really interesting ideas. But I kind of came to, when I was thinking about my goals, just getting ready for that episode with him, I was thinking like, man, maybe I haven't set my goals like lofty enough, like I've just kind of been like, okay, cool. I want to just sustain my family, do creative work every day. That's enough for me. But that's like a very modest goal. And sometimes when you have modest goals, like you even come short of those goals. But like if you set a really lofty goal, then you could get really close to there, or you could get partway there and get beyond what you even expected. So I think it's a lesson I'm thinking about,
Me too, man. It got me thinking as well, because I felt like I said, like I always had these goals of like, okay, well, what's next? At some point, it was just like, you just keep going, without thinking about it. And talking to him definitely made me feel bad about myself. It's like, okay, I'm slacking, like I need to get back on the on this whole wagon and like
Right.
start
But
setting some new goals.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, totally. I feel like there's also times in your life where